Imagine a dinner party where a child sits perfectly still. While other kids are running around, causing a mess, or demanding attention, this child is a dream. The guests lean over and whisper to the parents, "You're so lucky. They're so well behaved." The parents smile, feeling a sense of pride. But if you look closer into the quiet vacancy of that child's eyes, you'll see something haunting. They aren't behaving. They are disappearing. Why do some of us grow up feeling like we have to be invisible to be loved? Why does the thought of asking for help feel like a heavy, unforgivable sin? And how is it possible that the best children often turn into the most broken adults? You might think you were just a good kid, but the truth is, your silence wasn't a choice. It was a survival strategy. This is the hidden tragedy of the ignored child syndrome. But here's the most chilling part. The people who neglected you probably didn't even know they were doing it. Stick with us because understanding this silence is the first step to finally being heard. But here's the most chilling part. We often define trauma by the presence of bad things, a blow to the face, a screaming match, or a visible scar. But for the ignored child, trauma is defined by absence, the things that didn't happen. It's the hug you didn't receive when you were crying, the "how was your day?" that was never asked, and the emotional validation that simply never arrived. This is what Dr. Jonas Webb, a pioneer in the field, calls childhood emotional neglect, CEN. In her 2012 landmark research, she highlights a paradox. Because there is no event to point to, victims often blame themselves for their inner emptiness, thinking, "My parents provided food and a roof, so why do I feel so broken?" The data is even more revealing. Longitudinal studies in developmental psychology suggest that emotional invisibility can be just as damaging as physical abuse, if not more so, because it's invisible. It creates a hollow self-concept. You weren't taught how to feel, so you learned how to go numb. But here's the pivot you need to understand. Your hyper-independence isn't a personality trait you were born with. It's a wall you built to survive a world where you were your only protector. But how does this invisible scar manifest in your daily life today? The signs are more specific than you might think. The first and most striking hallmark of the ignored child is what psychologists call hyperindependence. To the outside world, you appear as the ultimate success story, the person who has it all together, the one who never misses a deadline, and the friend who never complains. But internally, this independence isn't a badge of honor. It's a defensive fortress. Because your emotional needs were consistently met with silence or "not now" during your formative years, your developing brain reached a logical, albeit painful, conclusion. If I don't ask for anything, I can't be disappointed. You learned to parent yourself before you even knew how to tie your shoelaces. This aligns with the attachment theory developed by John Bowlby and Mary Ainsworth, specifically the avoidant attachment style. When a caregiver is emotionally unavailable, the child stops seeking proximity and starts relying solely on themselves to regulate distress. In your adult life, this manifests as a physical tightening in your chest when someone offers to help you. You might find yourself working until 2 a.m. on a project rather than asking a colleague for a 5-minute clarification. You feel that needing someone is a sign of weakness or worse, a dangerous liability. But here's the paradox. While you are everyone's rock, you often feel like you are drowning in plain sight, convinced that no one would catch you if you fell. It's a lonely way to live, isn't it? Being the person who takes care of everyone, but has no one to take care of them. But this self-reliance often hides a much deeper, more silent symptom that affects how you see your very existence. But here's the paradox. While you are everyone's rock, you often feel like you are drowning in plain sight. If hyperindependence is the external armor, then the void is what lies beneath it. Many who grew up as ignored children describe a persistent, nagging feeling of emptiness, as if there is a hollow space where their self should be. You might have a successful career, a stable home, and friends, yet you often find yourself staring out a window, feeling like a ghost in your own life. This isn't necessarily depression, though it is often misdiagnosed as such. In the context of childhood emotional neglect, this emptiness is the result of a lack of emotional mirroring. According to Dr. Donald Winnicott, a renowned psychoanalyst, a child learns who they are by seeing their emotions reflected in their parents' eyes. When you cried and no one looked, or when you were excited and no one noticed, that part of your identity failed to crystallize. You didn't learn that your feelings were real or valid, so you eventually stopped feeling them altogether to avoid the pain of them being ignored. In your daily life, this manifests as a profound sense of being different or flawed in a way you can't quite explain. You might watch others connect, laugh, and cry, and feel like you are watching a movie in a language you don't speak. You are physically present, but emotionally offline. This numbness is a sophisticated survival mechanism. Your brain decided long ago that feeling nothing was safer than feeling the agony of being invisible. But this void does more than just make you feel empty. It actively distorts how you perceive your own needs and desires, leading to a strange kind of identity amnesia. Have you ever realized that you know exactly what everyone else needs, but have no idea what you want for dinner? You are physically present, but emotionally offline. This numbness is a sophisticated survival mechanism. The third hallmark of the ignored child is a phenomenon I call identity amnesia, which often masquerades as being easygoing. Because no one ever asked you what you wanted, what you felt, or what you dreamed of, you never developed a solid internal compass. You became a master of reading the room, not your own heart. In psychology, this is closely linked to the concept of the false self, a term coined by Donald Winnicott. You created a version of yourself that was designed to be as low maintenance as possible, ensuring you would never be a burden to the already distracted adults in your life. This evolution naturally leads to chronic people-pleasing. You don't please others because you are nice. You do it because, for an ignored child, conflict is terrifying. Conflict requires you to stand your ground, but you don't feel you have any ground to stand on. Research by Dr. Gabor Mate suggests that children will always choose attachment over authenticity to survive. If being your true, loud, needy self meant being ignored, you chose to be the quiet, helpful, perfect person that everyone else needed you to be. In your adult relationships, this looks like saying yes to every favor while your resentment quietly builds. It looks like changing your opinions to match whoever you are talking to because you genuinely aren't sure what your own opinion is. You're a mirror reflecting everyone else's light while sitting in your own darkness. But the most painful part of this mirroring is that while you are busy saving everyone else, you are losing the only person who can actually save you, yourself. But what happens when this perfect facade starts to crack? What is the actual biological and environmental root of all this silence? You are a mirror reflecting everyone else's light while sitting in your own darkness. To understand why the ignored child carries these shadows into adulthood, we must look at the biological and environmental roots of development. Human infants are born with the most plastic brains of any mammal, and our primary survival mechanism isn't teeth or claws. It is attachment. When a caregiver fails to respond to a child's emotional cues, it triggers a state of chronic stress. According to the famous still face experiment conducted by Dr. Edward Tronick at Harvard, when a mother stops responding to her infant, the child first tries to regain her attention with smiles and reaching. When that fails, the infant collapses into a state of withdrawal and despair. For the ignored child, this isn't a 3-minute experiment. It is their childhood. Biologically, this lack of response affects the development of the right orbitofrontal cortex, the area of the brain responsible for emotional regulation and social connection. Furthermore, Dr. Alan Shore, a leading neurobiologist, explains that without affect regulation from a parent, the child never learns how to soothe their own nervous system. They either stay in a state of high alert hypervigilance, leading to anxiety, or more commonly, they shut down as a primitive defense. This is called dissociation. You didn't become quiet because it was your nature. You became quiet because your brain realized that screaming into a void only wasted precious energy. This isn't just about bad parenting. It's often about generational trauma or parents who were themselves emotionally illiterate. However, understanding the source is not an excuse to stay wounded. It is the map for your recovery. But before we talk about healing, we must address the hidden dangers of letting these patterns go unchecked. You didn't become quiet because it was your nature. You became quiet because your brain realized that screaming into a void only wasted precious energy. While identifying with these traits can be a powerful moment of aha, we must be careful not to romanticize this trauma as a superpower of the self-made. Hyperindependence is not true strength. It is a rigid defense mechanism that, if left unaddressed, leads to burnout, chronic loneliness, and physical health issues. It is also vital to avoid broadly labeling all quiet or busy parents as toxic. Emotional neglect is often a silent, intergenerational cycle. Many parents couldn't give what they never received themselves. Furthermore, psychological profiles are not one size fits all. Your experience of being an ignored child may vary based on your cultural background, your birth order, or your inherent temperament. This content is for self-reflection and educational purposes and should never replace professional clinical diagnosis or therapy. If these realizations feel overwhelming, please reach out to a licensed mental health professional. Healing is not about blaming the past, but about taking responsibility for the person you are becoming today. Now that we've navigated the warnings, how do we move forward? Let's summarize what we've learned and find the first step toward reclaiming your voice. The journey of the ignored child is one of the most silent paths a human can walk. You spent years becoming a master of invisibility, believing that your silence was your strength. But as we've explored today, true strength doesn't lie in never needing anyone. It lies in the courage to finally acknowledge that you exist, that your emotions have weight, and that your voice deserves to be heard. Healing begins the moment you stop being your own ignored child and start being your own compassionate parent. If this video felt like someone was finally reading the pages of your private diary, know that you are not alone in this void. The invisible scar is real, but it can be healed. Start small. The next time you need help, try asking for it. The next time you feel a hollow sensation, don't run away. Just sit with it. If you found value in this deep dive, please give this video a like and share it with someone who might be struggling in silence. Subscribe to join our community of thinkers and seekers as we continue to decode the mysteries of the human heart. And tell me in the comments, what was the one thing you always wanted to say as a child but never did? Let's start the conversation there. Until next time, keep looking inward. If this video felt like someone was finally reading the pages of your private diary, know that you are not alone in this void.